It was the day after Christmas. The year was 1996. Snow rested softly on the quiet, upscale streets of Boulder, Colorado. Inside a grand Tudor home, a festive season was supposed to be in full swing. The Ramsey family lived there. They seemed to have everything. But on this cold December morning, something was terribly wrong. The peace of the holiday was about to be shattered. A nightmare was just beginning to unfold, one that would grip the nation and refuse to let go. It was a story that started with a mother's panicked scream and a missing child. Patsy Ramsey, the mother, said she woke up early. She headed downstairs to make coffee, but she found something that stopped her cold. It was a piece of paper on the spiral staircase. It wasn't a Christmas card or a forgotten note. It was a ransom letter, 3 pages long. It said her daughter, 6-year-old JonBenét, had been taken. The little girl, a child beauty queen with a bright smile, was gone from her bed. The house, usually filled with laughter and life, suddenly felt empty and silent. A deep, chilling fear had taken over. The world outside was still waking up. Neighbors were still dreaming of holiday cheer. But inside 755 15th Street, a frantic search had begun. Patsy called 911. Her voice was filled with desperation. She told the operator her daughter was gone. She said there was a note, the police were on their way. But time was already slipping away. Every second felt like an hour. The beautiful home had transformed into a place of dread. The happy memories of Christmas Day were now a distant, painful echo in the face of an unthinkable horror. What happened in that house? That is the question that has echoed for decades. It started on a seemingly perfect winter morning, a morning that promised leftovers and new toys. Instead, it delivered a mystery wrapped in sorrow. The disappearance of JonBenét Ramsey was not just a family tragedy, it became an American obsession. It was a puzzle with too many pieces that didn't fit. And it all began in the stillness of that snowy Boulder morning, with a silent house and a missing little girl. The story was just getting started, and it would be a long, dark road from here. Patsy Ramsey's call to 911 set everything in motion. The time was 5:52 a.m. Her words were panicked and breathless. "We have a kidnapping, hurry, please," she pleaded. Police officers arrived at the Ramsey home just minutes later. They walked into a scene that was already spiraling out of control. The house was supposed to be a crime scene, a place where every detail mattered. But it wasn't treated that way. Friends and family were called. They started arriving, offering comfort and support, but their presence would later become a major problem for the investigation. The first officers on the scene saw the ransom note. It was long and rambling. It demanded a very specific amount of money, $118,000. It warned the Ramseys not to contact the police. It said a small foreign faction was watching them. The police began to follow the instructions, setting up for a potential ransom call. They waited. The house filled with more people. Everyone was looking for JonBenét. They searched her room. They looked around the house, but they did not search the basement thoroughly at first. It was a critical mistake. Hours passed. The promised call from the kidnappers never came. The morning turned into a tense afternoon. The hope of a safe return began to fade. A detective, Linda Arndt, was at the house. She asked John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, to do another search. She suggested he look everywhere from top to bottom. John went with a family friend, Fleet White. They went down to the basement. It was a dark, cluttered space, a place for storage, a place where things are often forgotten. But what they found there would never be forgotten. There, in a small windowless room, John Ramsey made the discovery. His daughter, JonBenét, was there. She was wrapped in her favorite white blanket. A piece of duct tape was over her mouth. A nylon cord was around her neck and wrists. She wasn't kidnapped. She had been in the house the entire time. The frantic search was over. The worst possible fear had come true. The little girl was gone forever, and the kidnapping case had just turned into a murder investigation. The question was no longer, where is JonBenét? It was now, who did this? Before the tragedy, the Ramseys looked like the perfect American family. They had wealth, success, and beauty. John Ramsey was a successful businessman. He was the president of Access Graphics, a billion-dollar company. He was a respected figure in the community. He projected an image of strength and stability. He was a father who seemed to provide everything for his family. They lived in a large, impressive home. They were the picture of the American dream. But that picture would soon be torn apart for the whole world to see. Patsy Ramsey was a former beauty queen herself. She had been Miss West Virginia in 1977. She was a devoted mother. She poured her energy into her children, Burke and JonBenét. She was the one who entered JonBenét into the world of child beauty pageants. To some, this was a mother living out her own dreams through her daughter. To others, it was just a fun hobby for a little girl who loved to perform. JonBenét, with her blonde hair and bright costumes, became a familiar face on the pageant circuit. She was a star in the making. Their son Burke was 9 years old at the time. He was the quiet older brother. When the police arrived on that chaotic morning, he was reportedly asleep in his room. He was kept away from the initial turmoil. He would later be questioned by investigators, but he was just a child, caught in the middle of an event that no one could comprehend. The family unit, once so polished and put together, was now at the center of a grim investigation. Their private lives were about to become public property. The shock and sadness were immense. A family that seemed to have it all had lost the most precious thing. Their little girl was gone. But as the investigation began, suspicion quickly fell upon them. Could this perfect family be hiding a dark secret? The police looked at them closely. The public started to wonder. The Ramseys, grieving and horrified, found themselves in an impossible position. They were not just victims. In the eyes of many, they were also the primary suspects. Their perfect family portrait was shattered forever. The ransom note was one of the strangest parts of the case. It was not a typical demand for money. It was long, it was dramatic, and it was written on a notepad found inside the Ramsey house. The pen used to write it also came from the house. This was an immediate red flag for investigators. Why would a kidnapper take the time to sit down and write a 3-page note at the crime scene? It seemed risky. It seemed illogical. The note itself raised more questions than it answered. The note demanded $118,000. This was not a random number. It was almost the exact amount of a bonus John Ramsey had recently received from his job. How would an outsider know this specific detail? It suggested the writer had inside knowledge of the family's finances. The note was addressed to John. It was signed SBTC, which stood for Victory. The language was odd, filled with lines from movies like Dirty Harry and Speed. It read like someone was trying to sound like a movie villain, not a real criminal. The note claimed to be from a small foreign faction that respected John's business but not his country. This seemed far-fetched. There was no evidence of any foreign group targeting the Ramseys. The note was also incredibly detailed in its instructions. It told the Ramseys how to get the money. It warned them what would happen if they didn't follow the rules. "If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies," one line read. The tone was both menacing and theatrical. Handwriting experts were brought in to analyze the note. They compared it to samples from both Patsy and John Ramsey. The results were inconclusive. Some experts thought Patsy might have written it, while others disagreed. The note was a puzzle. Was it a genuine ransom demand from a bizarre kidnapper, or was it a carefully crafted piece of misdirection, a way to cover up a crime that happened inside the house? The note remains a central, baffling piece of evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey mystery. From the very beginning, the investigation was troubled. The crime scene was not properly secured. This is, honestly, one of the most widely criticized aspects of the case. When police first arrived, they believed they were dealing with a kidnapping. They roped off JonBenét's bedroom, but the rest of the sprawling house was left open. Friends, family, and a victim's advocate were allowed to roam freely. They walked through the kitchen, the living room, and the hallways. They even helped clean the kitchen surfaces, potentially wiping away crucial evidence. This contamination created huge problems. It made it, really difficult to know which clues were left by a potential killer, and which were left by the many visitors. Fingerprints could have been smudged, fibers could have been transferred. The integrity of the scene was compromised before the full scope of the crime was even known. When John Ramsey found his daughter's body, he immediately picked her up. He carried her upstairs from the basement. This act, born from a father's grief, further disturbed the evidence around her. The police themselves made questionable decisions. The initial search of the house was not thorough enough. The basement where JonBenét's body was hidden was overlooked for hours. An officer had briefly looked into the wine cellar room where she was later found but didn't see her in the darkness. He had not opened the door. The focus was on the kidnapping theory. It was on the ransom note and the expected phone call. This narrow focus meant vital time was lost. Evidence that could have pointed to a killer may have disappeared in those early, chaotic hours. The autopsy later revealed the horrific details of JonBenét's death. She had suffered a severe skull fracture. She had been strangled with a garrote made from a nylon cord and a piece of a broken paintbrush. The paintbrush came from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies. This discovery only deepened the suspicion on the family. How could an intruder find these specific items in the house and use them to commit such a terrible crime? The confusing scene and the strange evidence created a fog of uncertainty that has never fully lifted. Over the years, three main theories about who killed JonBenét have dominated the conversation. The first, and the one that police focused on initially, was that a family member was responsible. Suspicion fell on John and Patsy Ramsey. The theory suggested there was an accident, or a moment of rage, followed by a panicked cover-up. The elaborate ransom note, written on their own notepad, was seen as a way to stage a kidnapping. The specific amount of money and the garrote made from items in the house seemed to point inward, not outward. Another version of this theory focused on JonBenét's older brother, Burke. He was only 9 at the time. This theory proposed that he might have accidentally hurt his sister, perhaps in an argument over a toy or a late-night snack. Then his parents, John and Patsy, staged the crime scene to protect their son. The Ramseys have always fiercely denied this. They have maintained that Burke was asleep the entire time and had nothing to do with his sister's death. But the theory persists. A dark shadow hanging over the family. The second major theory is the intruder theory. This is the theory that the Ramsey family has always believed. It suggests that a stranger broke into the house that night and killed JonBenét. There was some evidence to support this. An open basement window had a suitcase placed beneath it, possibly used as a step. A footprint was found near the suitcase that did not match any of the family members. Most importantly, unknown male DNA was found in JonBenét's underwear and under her fingernails. This DNA did not belong to anyone in the Ramsey family. Beyond these main theories, other suspects have emerged from the shadows over the years. One of the most famous was John Mark Carr, a schoolteacher who was arrested in Thailand in 2006. He made a shocking confession claiming he was with JonBenét when she died. The world watched, thinking the case was finally solved. But it was a false alarm. His DNA did not match the sample from the crime scene. His story was filled with inconsistencies. He was eventually released. He was just one of many strange figures to briefly step into the spotlight of this perplexing case. The JonBenét Ramsey case was not just a police investigation, it quickly became a media sensation. The story had all the elements that capture public attention: a beautiful, wealthy family, a sweet, innocent child who was also a beauty queen, an unsolved murder in a quiet, affluent town. News vans lined the streets of the Ramseys' neighborhood. Reporters from around the world descended on Boulder. The case was on the cover of every magazine and the top story on every news broadcast. The spotlight was intense and unforgiving. This media frenzy had a powerful effect on the case. It turned the Ramsey family into household names. Their photos were everywhere. Every detail of their lives was examined and judged. The fact that JonBenét was a pageant contestant became a major focus. Images of her in full makeup and elaborate costumes were shown over and over. This created a narrative that some people found disturbing. It painted a picture of a little girl whose childhood was not what it seemed. Public opinion began to form, often based on speculation rather than facts. The pressure from the media also affected the investigation. The Boulder Police Department was a relatively small force. They were not used to handling a case of this magnitude, especially under such intense public scrutiny. Every move they made was analyzed and criticized. Leaks from inside the investigation were common. Details, both true and false, were reported in the press. This created a rift between the police and the Ramsey family, who felt they were being tried in the court of public opinion. The public became an army of armchair detectives. People chose sides. You either believed the Ramseys were innocent, victims of a terrible crime and a flawed investigation, or you believed they were guilty, hiding a monstrous secret behind a wall of money and lawyers. The case became a cultural phenomenon, a modern-day mystery that everyone had an opinion on. That intense glare of the spotlight made it harder to see the truth clearly. It created a storm of noise and speculation that, for many, has never really died down. For years the case seemed to be at a standstill, but science was moving forward. DNA technology was becoming more and more powerful. In the early days of the investigation, the DNA evidence was limited, but there was one crucial piece: the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's long johns and under her fingernails. In 2008, new, more sensitive testing confirmed this DNA belonged to a single unidentified male. It did not match John, Burke, or any other Ramsey family member. This was a major turning point. Based on this DNA evidence, the Boulder District Attorney at the time, Mary Lacey, took a bold step. She wrote a public letter to John and Patsy Ramsey. In it, she officially exonerated them and their son, Burke. She apologized for the suspicion they had lived under for so long. She stated that the evidence pointed to an unknown intruder. For the Ramseys, it was a moment of vindication. But it did not solve the case. The DNA profile existed, but it had not been matched to anyone in the National Criminal Database. The killer's genetic fingerprint was there, but his name was still a secret. In recent years, even more advanced DNA techniques have emerged. One of these is genetic genealogy. This is the same technology used to catch the Golden State Killer. It involves taking the unknown DNA profile and uploading it to public genealogy databases. Investigators can then search for relatives of the unknown person. By building a family tree, they can narrow down the search and identify a potential suspect. It's a powerful tool that has solved dozens of cold cases across the country. And it offers a new glimmer of hope for the JonBenét case. Despite these advances, progress has been slow. In late 2023, the Boulder Police Department announced a new review with the Colorado cold case team. They digitized all the evidence and said they were pursuing helpful recommendations. By 2025, the department acknowledged that the initial investigation had flaws, but insisted they were actively working with DNA experts. Yet, the core mystery remains. The DNA is the ghost in the machine, an unseen clue waiting for the right technology and the right moment to finally reveal its name. Decades have passed since that cold December morning. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer in 2006, never seeing justice for her daughter. Burke Ramsey, now a man, has lived his entire life in the shadow of the case. And John Ramsey, the father who found his little girl in the basement, continues his fight for answers. He is older now, but his determination has not faded. His primary mission is to convince the Boulder Police Department to use the latest DNA technology to finally solve the crime. John Ramsey has been very public in his efforts. He and his son John Andrew have given interviews and spoken out. They have urged the police to hand over the DNA evidence to an independent lab that specializes in genetic genealogy. They believe that the technology exists right now to find the killer. They point to specific items from the crime scene, like the garrote and the ransom note, that they believe could hold more DNA clues if tested with modern methods. Their frustration with the official investigation is clear. They feel that time is running out. In early 2025, there was a glimmer of progress. John Ramsey met with the new Boulder Police Chief, Stephen Redfern. Ramsey expressed a new sense of optimism, feeling that the department's leadership was finally taking his pleas seriously. The police have stated they are committed to solving the case and are working with federal and state partners. Yet the family still feels left in the dark, waiting for a breakthrough. The release of a new Netflix docuseries in late 2024 brought the case back into the public eye, highlighting the ongoing struggle for truth. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey left a permanent scar on the American psyche. It is a story about the loss of innocence, the fallibility of justice, and the enduring power of a mystery. It showed us how a family's perfect image could be shattered overnight. It revealed the chaotic intersection of tragedy, media, and public perception. Today, the case is still officially open and unsolved. But for a father who has already lost so much, the fight for justice is never over. The hope remains that one day the final chapter of this chilling story will finally be written.